One of the interesting components of tonight's count, of course, is the independent seats, 5 of them in all. We've acknowledged that one of those seats is gone and that Carleen Maywald of the Nationals and the seat of Chaffey has lost her seat to the Liberals. But let's take a look at the other 4 independent seats. The seat of Mitchell, for instance, in the inner southern suburbs of Adelaide, held by Chris Hanna, an independent. He's been there since '97. He started with Labor, across to the Greens and now independent. Held this only on 0.5%, but with 56% of the vote counted.
Well, Kerry, I think we have to dwell on the screens a bit on this. If we get past this one, 4,200 to Labor, 32%, 30%, 28%. It's almost line ball between the 3 of them. It's the next screen I think we need to dwell on just for a minute. Because what we can see is the 2-party preferred vote is suggesting 60% for the independent. But they're so close on those first preference votes that it really depends on who gets first, who comes second, who comes third. At the moment, Chris Hanna is running second, and hence it's the Liberal preferences which will be used to go to him. But at the moment, the computer's suggesting Chris Hanna will be elected. I think it's going to be quite a close result.
OK, can we look at the seat of Fisher? This is, again, in the southern suburbs. This is held by Bob Such as an independent. With a margin of 16%, we've got 75.6% of the vote counted.
People have been talking on the panel tonight about how good campaigning works. Well, Bob Such, to my knowledge, is one of the greatest campaigners, local campaigners of all. He spends a massive amount of time in the electorate, and it's paid off. 41% of the vote, the Liberal Party 26% and the ALP 22%. Bob has worked very hard indeed. I think that's shown by this sort of swing of another 2% to give him almost 68% of the votes, which is a very high vote for any independent. He'll certainly be returned to Parliament.
Maybe, Speaker. And we talked about the seat of Chaffey. This is Carleen Maywald's seat. She did have a margin of 16.2%, but not anymore after 75% of the vote counted.
And I think you could probably put this issue down to water. We had 2 of the prime candidates, Tim Whetstone and Carleen Maywald, centrally concerned with water, with irrigation, with the local area. And it's obvious that on this occasion, the local community has picked the Liberal Party rather than the National Party to represent them. Looking at that sort of 2-party preferred, you get a 19% swing to the Liberal Party. There's a very clear statement there that after this election, the Liberal Party is the one they wanted to be the boss in Chaffey. So Mr Whetstone will be elected.
OK, the other independent seat of Mount Gambier, and this is a very interesting seat again. This is, I'm not sure what's happening here. Yes. Where Rory McEwen is no longer the member, he's retired. We've got a kind of line ball situation here between the independent candidate and the Liberal candidate with 75% of the vote counted.
Well, it's a repeat of the last 2 elections because the last 2 elections were fought out by the Liberal Party and Rory McEwen as an independent. This one's being fought out by the Liberal Party and a new independent candidate. Mr Perryman is the mayor and Mr Pegler was the mayor of the Grant Council. So, I mean, we've got a local control, local government involvement, local involvement. It's a close result, but at the moment Mr Pegler is certainly ahead by a couple of percent with a 7.4% swing in his favour. But what needs to be said here is that this result doesn't affect whether Liberal or Labor form the government. It's an argument that's going on in a local area between an independent and a Liberal candidate.
Now, Rob Lewis, you've got some intelligence on that, on Mount Gambier. I think that suggests you might be a little bit ahead.
A little bit, because Mount Gambier is my hometown originally, and it's had a history of supporting independents. But the reason why I asked you to pull that up is that anything which is within 1 or 2% at this particular stage is too close to be putting in the independent category, because we have done a comprehensive postal voting campaign. The independent candidate obviously doesn't have the same capacity, has the party backing to do that sort of thing, so we'd be very hopeful the postal declaration votes, etc., would support us there, and hopefully might just sneak us across the line. So it is still a very close seat, and I think at this stage it's one of those a bit like Bright that you put in the... And I think from the looks of it, the Mitchell one too, that Mitchell looks doubtful. You're not going to be able to call that tonight. Mount Gambier you can't call tonight. Bright you can't call tonight. We've got a little question mark about Hartley, the way we're coming back strongly in Hartley.
Although that run does seem to have petered.
Although we're 3.8%, we still need a couple of percent more. Yeah. Concede that.
Now, as you've probably noticed, we've reached a point in the night where in most of the seats we're getting pretty close to, if we haven't arrived at the point where there won't be any further votes counted in those seats. Once you get up around the 70-75% mark, there's such a large block of postal votes in this election that could be the end of the count whenever you see a seat get to the 70-75% mark. Now, that being the case, we're in the hands of the leaders, really, at this point. Obviously, they will want to say something, and no doubt we'll be hearing from them in the not-too-distant future, given that there's not too much further light to be shed on the outcomes. But while we're waiting, what we might do is take a look at some of the blocks of seats that we haven't spent a lot of time with yet tonight, and what we might do in this instance is take a look at I think, some of the safe Labor seats, because this also tells a story of part of this pattern of very different swings in different locations. The seat of Croydon in the western suburbs. This is a seat held by Michael Parkinson for Labor. In fact, he's the Attorney-General. He had a margin of 26.1%. With 65.6% of the vote counted. What's happened there, Dean?
Well, it's not often I hear Mick Atkinson referred to as Michael, although that was certainly on the screen. He's really, well, usually known as Mick. But he will win the seat. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's a very rock-solid, safe seat. Michael Atkinson is one of the great campaigners again. He campaigns on a push bike. But then again, if you look at this, western suburbs, there's a huge swing, almost double the statewide swing, 12% to the Liberal Party. So, once again, we've seen that pattern. But Mick Atkinson will be back. Whether it will be an Attorney-General is another matter. OK, now the seat of Cheltenham, again in the western suburbs. This is Labor territory for sure. Jay Weatherill holds this seat and is also talked of as a future leader. With a margin of 25.5%, 73.7% of the vote counted, Dean. Well, this would have to be the final counting for the night. Jay Weatherill will certainly win the seat. There's no question at all about that. The only decision to be made is to whether the same pattern applies. So if we can shift to the swing graphic, you'll be able to see that, in fact, there's been a very similar large swing to the Liberal Party, 9% again. So although these seats are rock-solid safe, will be held by the Labor Party, there's been a very strong swing to the Liberal Party right across these very, very safe Labor seats. Well, there's a seat of Colton, which you might not be able to call rock-solid safe for Labor after tonight, held by Paul Kiker, with a margin of 16%, but after 75.8% of the vote counted, that lead has shrunk significantly. Very significantly indeed. I would call at any stage 16% a safe seat. Paul Kiker, however, 47% of the votes, where the Liberal Party has only 39%. I would still call 16% a very safe seat, but the important thing is that there's been a massive swing to the Liberal Party, and on this occasion it's 12.2%. So it's turned what was a safe Labor seat into what is now a marginal seat. Paul Kiker will be returned, but he may have to fight hard to win it in the next election. OK, Lee, the northwestern suburbs, near Port Adelaide and held by Police Minister Michael Wright, with a margin of 19.8%, but another story similar again. Well, 19.8%, the only... You have to get to the Premier's seat of Ramsay to get much bigger than that. 46%, not even elected on first preferences, which is an unusual situation for these Western electorates. If you look at the swings, you'll find that, once again, we've had the same situation in the West. Now, I think maybe the Labor Party needs to look at itself or go into this a bit more and try and explain why there have been these, what I would call massive swings, tidal wave swings, but only in those very safe Labor seats. Michael Wright will be returned. OK, the seat of Enfield, this is the inner northern suburbs. John Rouse held this for the last two terms for Labor. He's on a margin of 24.5%,
But with 70.8% of the vote counted, another big swing.
Another big swing. John Rowe has been touted certainly as a ministerial candidate at some time in the future. He will hold the seat. He holds one of the safest seats. Usually if you hold a safe seat, you are pretty well a candidate for the ministry at some stage. But if you look at the swing, again the same thing. This is not a Western seat, this is rather a northern seat. And the swing here is 15% to the Liberal Party. Maybe, I think there is a message there, but certainly John Rowe will be back as the member for Enfield.